I never thought a backyard barbecue would change my life. I wasn't expecting a dramatic fight, no explosive argument, no door slammed. Just one comment, one sentence, tossed out like a joke, and everything I thought I knew about my relationship shattered. My name's Lucas. I'm 34. I run a small but successful construction business in Portland, and until a year ago I was in what I thought was a stable, loving relationship with Sarah. We had been together for 3 years. She worked in public relations, polished, ambitious, always thinking 10 steps ahead, while I came from a blue-collar background, building things with my hands, proud of the life I had built from scratch. We balanced each other out, or so I believed. But here's the question that kept me up for nights after that barbecue. How do you know when someone really respects you? Not just loves you, not just says the right words, but genuinely respects you? And what do you do when you realize the person closest to you doesn't? It all started so small. We were at a backyard party, hosted by our friends Tyler and Megan, drinking beers, laughing, the usual weekend gathering. That's when Chloe, Sarah's best friend, leaned over, smirked, and said, loud enough for the group, "I still can't believe you're with this loser." She laughed. Sarah laughed. Everyone chuckled like it was harmless, just Chloe being Chloe. But me? I felt something crack inside. It wasn't the insult itself. I can handle worse. It was the fact that Sarah didn't flinch, didn't push back, didn't even glance at me with a hint of concern. At that moment, something shifted. You might think I overreacted. Why let one dumb comment ruin a relationship? But here's where it gets interesting, because that night set off a chain of events I couldn't have predicted. That moment when Chloe called me a loser didn't explode into a confrontation, at least not right away. I stood there, beer in hand, forcing a tight smile, pretending to laugh along, but inside my chest tightened. I watched Sarah across the patio, surrounded by her friends, perfectly at ease, like she hadn't just heard her best friend humiliate me. Did she not notice? Did she not care? I kept replaying the scene in my head. Chloe's smirk, the smug tilt of her chin, Sarah's easy laugh, the ripple of chuckles from the group. Not one person flinched. And me? I stood frozen, feeling like the ground under my feet had shifted. I'm not the guy who starts drama. I've always been the one who smooths things over, who takes a deep breath and lets the little stuff slide. That's how I've run my business, how I've handled life. Stay calm, keep your head down, push forward. But that night, under the soft glow of string lights and the hum of music, I felt something snap. And it wasn't anger, not really. It was a cold, clear awareness. This wasn't just about one dumb joke at a party. This was about the little jabs that had built up over months. The eye rolls when I talked about a project, the digs about my old truck, the subtle nudges to dress a bit sharper or be a bit more polished around her friends. I'd ignored it, brushed it off, convinced myself it didn't matter. But standing there, I realized I couldn't keep pretending. So I did the one thing no one expected. I quietly set my drink down, leaned into Sarah, and said I was heading out. No raised voice, no public scene, no accusations, just done. I turned and left. I remember the cool night air hitting my face as I walked home through the Portland streets, my heart racing, but my mind surprisingly calm. I figured Sarah would text, maybe call, ask what was going on. But that night stretched into silence, and that silence told me more than any argument could. What I didn't realize yet was that by walking away, by quietly drawing that line, I had set off something much bigger. What happened next would tear open truths I hadn't wanted to face, force me to stand my ground, and ultimately change the course of my life. The morning after I left the party, I expected Sarah to show up at my place, or at least flood my phone, with messages. Instead, I woke up to a handful of short texts. "Where'd you go?" "You left early, everything okay?" No apology, no acknowledgement, just casual check-ins, like she wasn't sure if she should even be concerned. I didn't respond right away. I wanted to see what she'd do. By noon, the tone shifted. "Are you mad at me? Why are you ignoring me? Can we talk?" Still, I stayed quiet, sorting through my own feelings. It wasn't just about the party. It was everything that moment had exposed. By that evening, the texts turned sharper. "I can't believe you're ghosting me. You're being dramatic. I don't know what you want from me." It was strange how quickly the concern flipped into frustration, even blame. I realized then how often I'd been the one smoothing things over, being the reasonable one, giving the benefit of the doubt. But this time, I wanted her to come to me, not because I demanded it, but because she cared enough to take responsibility. When she finally showed up at my apartment 2 days later, she was all smiles at first, like we could just brush past it. "Hey, can we talk?" she said, stepping inside without waiting for me to answer. I watched her pace, arms waving as she tried to explain it away. "It was just Chloe being Chloe," she insisted. "You know how she is. She doesn't mean anything by it." She laughed like it was a small thing, like I was overreacting. But the more she talked, the clearer it became. She wasn't here to understand why I was hurt. She was here to smooth it over, to reset things back to how they were. I told her calmly, "It's not about Chloe. It's about you. It's about the fact that you didn't stand up for me, that you laughed along." Her face shifted, the smile fading. "Come on, Lucas," she said. "You're making this into something bigger than it is." And right there I knew this conversation wasn't going to end the way she thought it would. When Sarah came back the next evening, she was less cheerful. She sat across from me, arms folded, eyebrows drawn tight. "Look," she started, "I didn't mean to hurt you, okay? I was just caught up in the moment." I listened quietly, letting her speak. She talked about how Chloe had been drinking, how everyone was just joking, how I shouldn't take it so seriously. But the more she tried to explain it away, the more I felt a gap growing between us. She wasn't really hearing me. She was trying to patch the situation without understanding why it mattered so much. I told her plainly, "It's not the joke, Sarah. It's the fact that you didn't defend me. You laughed along." She flinched a little but recovered quickly. "You're making too much of this," she said, her voice tightening. "Why are you so sensitive all of a sudden? You've never cared about this kind of stuff before." I felt my jaw clench. Maybe that was the problem. I hadn't cared out loud before. I'd let too many little slights pass by, thinking they didn't matter. But they did. We went back and forth for nearly an hour. Every time I tried to explain why I was hurt, she pivoted. "So you're saying this is my fault? I can't control what Chloe says. You're blowing this up just to make me feel bad." I realized then that she wasn't interested in solving the real issue. She wanted me to drop it, to pretend everything was fine, to go back to how things were. But I couldn't. Finally, I took a breath and said what had been building inside me. "Sarah, I don't think you respect me. And I can't be in a relationship where respect isn't there." Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked genuinely shocked. "You're breaking up with me over this?" she whispered. I nodded slowly. "It's not just this. It's everything this brought to light." And just like that, I knew I was making the right decision, even though it hurt like hell. After the breakup, I hoped things would just settle quietly. I didn't want drama, didn't want anyone taking sides. But that's not what happened. A few days later, I started getting texts from mutual friends, Tyler, Megan, even people I barely knew, asking if I was okay, saying they'd seen Sarah's posts. Confused, I opened up social media, and there it was. A long emotional caption from Sarah painting herself as blindsided, heartbroken, and without naming me directly, hinting that I'd abandoned the relationship without warning. She posted a photo of us from happier times, added vague lines about betrayal, and waited for the sympathy to pour in. At first I was angry. My instinct was to respond, to post my side, to clear the air. But then I stopped myself. What was the point? I knew the truth. The people who mattered would either ask me directly or they wouldn't. So I stayed silent, even as I watched the likes and comments roll in on her posts. Friends took sides. Some reached out to me quietly, saying they understood. Others pulled back, probably unsure of what had really happened. Chloe, of course, was all over Sarah's feed, adding passive-aggressive comments, throwing shade, acting like I was the villain in some soap opera. It was a strange experience, watching my private life turn into public gossip. And yet through all of it I felt something surprising, relief. I wasn't interested in defending myself online or managing other people's opinions. I poured my energy into work, into rebuilding the parts of my life that mattered, my business, my friendships, my own sense of stability. The more I focused on what I could control, the clearer things became. Sarah's social media storm wasn't really about me. It was about her image, her need to control the narrative, to come out looking like the wounded party. And the more I refused to engage, the more obvious that became. About a week after the breakup, the real cracks started to show. Tyler called me one night, his voice tense. "Man, you're not going to believe this," he said. Turns out, Chloe, the same Chloe who called me a loser, had been having an affair with Tyler's brother for months right under Megan's nose. The news hit our whole friend circle like a grenade. Suddenly, the people who had been so quick to judge me were dealing with their own betrayals. I couldn't help but wonder how much of Chloe's hostility toward me had been her projecting her own mess. But that wasn't the only surprise. One afternoon I got a call from Sarah's dad, someone I always liked and respected. He asked if we could talk. Over coffee, he admitted he was disappointed in how Sarah had handled things. He even told me something I hadn't known. Apparently, Sarah had been snooping through my phone and emails for months, convinced I was hiding something, even though I wasn't. Hearing that was like a punch to the gut. I'd trusted her completely, never felt the need to check up on her, and yet she'd been digging through my personal stuff behind my back. Looking back, all the pieces started to fall into place. The weird tension, the little comments, the subtle shifts in how she treated me. They weren't just about me or our differences. They were about her own insecurities, her own inability to trust or be fully honest. And Chloe. She was a distraction, a loud, messy presence that kept Sarah from facing her own problems. It was painful to see how deep the betrayals ran, but in a strange way it also clarified things for me. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't imagining the distance or the disrespect. It was real, and it wasn't just about one backyard party. A few months after everything settled, I was finally in a good place, or so I thought. Work was steady, I was keeping my head down, and my personal life felt calmer without the constant tension. Then, out of nowhere, Sarah reached out. At first it was casual, a quick text asking how I was, how work was going. I was polite but distant, not eager to reopen old doors. But soon the texts got more specific. She started asking about certain business contacts, projects I was bidding on, and whether I might be willing to introduce her to a couple of people I'd worked with. That's when the alarm bells went off. I agreed to meet up for coffee, mostly because I wanted to see for myself what this was really about. Sitting across from her, I listened as she started weaving a story, how her company was trying to land a big client, how she remembered I'd done some work for them, how maybe, just maybe, I could help make an introduction. There was a softness in her tone, a warmth that felt familiar, but under it I could sense the calculation. She wasn't here because she missed me or because she wanted to repair what was broken. She was here because she needed something from me. For a moment, I was tempted. Part of me wanted to prove I was the bigger person, that I could be generous even after everything. But then I remembered all the times I'd been generous before, all the ways I'd bent over backward to keep the peace, to make her happy, to fit into her world. And I realized I didn't owe her this. I didn't owe her my connections, my goodwill, or my energy. So I smiled, thanked her for the coffee, and told her gently but firmly that I couldn't help. The look on her face, surprise flickering into frustration, told me everything I needed to know. Walking away from that conversation, I felt lighter. I knew then without a doubt that I had finally closed the door for good. After that final conversation with Sarah, something shifted inside me. I threw myself into my work, not to distract myself, but because I genuinely enjoyed building something I could be proud of. My construction business picked up momentum, and I found myself busier than ever. Clients were recommending me, projects were rolling in, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly grounded. I wasn't chasing anyone's approval, wasn't trying to prove my worth to people who didn't value it. I was just doing what I loved on my own terms. Meanwhile, word about Sarah's professional life trickled back through mutual friends. The big client she'd been hoping to land didn't come through. Chloe, once the queen bee of their social circle, had burned too many bridges. People were distancing themselves, tired of the drama. I didn't celebrate their setbacks. Honestly, I didn't feel much at all. It wasn't about revenge or karma or watching anyone fall. It was about focusing on what was in front of me, what I could control, what I wanted to build next. The biggest change, though, was in how I saw myself. I realized how much energy I had wasted trying to fit into a version of life that didn't match who I really was. I wasn't flashy or high profile or trying to climb social ladders. I was someone who found satisfaction in simple things, honest work, genuine connections, a quiet sense of pride in what I created. I started reconnecting with old friends I'd lost touch with, people who had always accepted me without conditions. And little by little, I began feeling more like myself again. There was no dramatic moment of triumph, no cinematic scene where everything magically fell into place. It was a slow, steady rebuild of my life, my confidence, my sense of peace. And as the months passed, I realized something powerful. Walking away hadn't been the end of anything. It had been the start of everything that came next. About 6 months after we'd gone our separate ways, I got a message from Sarah I didn't expect. It was simple. "Can we talk?" At first I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to leave the past buried. But curiosity, and maybe a bit of lingering respect, nudged me to agree. We met at a quiet coffee shop, and when she walked in, she looked different. Not in some big dramatic way, but softer, quieter, more tired. She sat down, took a breath and said, "I owe you an apology." What followed wasn't a defensive, half-hearted explanation. For the first time, Sarah admitted that she had let her insecurities run the show, that she'd been unfair, dismissive, and yes, even cruel at times. She confessed she'd started seeing a therapist, trying to understand why she always pushed people away or belittled the ones closest to her. She said she had hurt me not because she didn't care, but because she didn't know how to be truly vulnerable or honest with herself. Listening to her, I felt a strange mix of emotions, sadness, relief, and a quiet acceptance. I didn't lash out or unload all the hurt I'd carried. I just told her honestly, "I appreciate you saying that, I really do, but we're in different places now." And I meant it. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't waiting for closure or hoping for some grand reconciliation. I was simply ready to leave it all behind. As we parted ways, I felt lighter, as if some invisible weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had finally lifted. A few weeks later, I met Emily, an architect I crossed paths with through a woodworking project. She was thoughtful, down to earth, and from the start there was a mutual respect that felt different from anything I'd known before. We took things slowly, carefully, both of us cautious but open. And for the first time in a long while, I realized that the future didn't have to be defined by past mistakes. It could be something entirely new, built on honesty, respect, and a shared sense of curiosity about where life might take us next. Looking back on everything that happened, the biggest lesson I learned is this: respect is non-negotiable. You can love someone, share years together, build memories, and still lose sight of something as simple and essential as basic respect. I used to think that love could survive anything if you just worked hard enough, if you were patient, if you let the little things slide. But the truth is, it's not the big fights that erode a relationship. It's the quiet, daily ways we either lift each other up or tear each other down. Walking away from Sarah wasn't easy. It wasn't a dramatic choice or a revenge moment. It was a quiet, painful realization that no amount of explaining, no amount of waiting, was going to change the core issue between us. And once I accepted that, I discovered something powerful. Walking away isn't weakness. It's strength. It's knowing your worth even when others don't see it, and refusing to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's idea of who you should be. What I've learned is that peace doesn't come from fixing every broken thing or winning every argument. It comes from knowing when to let go, when to stop investing energy in something that no longer serves you, and when to focus instead on building a life that feels authentic. My business grew, my friendships deepened, and I found myself stepping into a new relationship, not because I needed someone to complete me, but because I was already whole on my own. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. People will treat you the way you allow them to. You teach others how to value you by the boundaries you set and the standards you hold. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't to fight or explain or prove yourself. It's to quietly walk away with your head held high, knowing you deserve better. If you've ever been in a situation like mine, I hope you remember that. You're stronger than you think, and you deserve a life built on respect, integrity, and real connection. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more.